This is the Emergency Communications Net. Good evening to everyone who checked in this evening. My name is Jerry. I'm located in Waxhaw, North Carolina, and I will be the net control station for this evening's net. Okay, we have several stations on the net this evening. Probably the list will grow here very shortly. We have KB4GKI as a second person who joined the net, and we also have a repeater, which I know is represented by Scott, who is the EC for his group. That is KC0 Alpha Quebec Sierra. And also we have KI4JMJ Derek. Okay, this evening we're going to be talking about Operation Security. This is going to probably be a little bit of a short lesson here. But what is Operation Security? That can be covered by several areas. It can have different definitions. But when we come to communications, Operation Security really has a very important role when it comes to communicating on the radio. There's an old saying an old saying states that loose lips sink ships. That means you just don't, when you get on the radio, talk about anything and everything, because it can be very detrimental to someone else, to you, and to the incident if you're deployed. For an example, back during an exercise we had in Union County, it was a FEMA graded exercise. One of the FEMA representatives at the hot wash, and when I say hot wash, that means a verbal after action report after the incident when everybody's gathered around, he mentioned something very important to us as an Aries group that was deployed in the EOC. He stated that we do not need to communicate everything we see or hear what goes on in the EOC over the radio. If we see something that we think that needs to be broadcast or aired over the net that we have there in the EOC, we need to get clearance with the emergency operations manager or the incident commander, depending on where we're deployed. And usually they will let us know what they want us to put out over the net. So if they don't okay it, or we don't hear anything stating it's okay to mention it, the best policy is not to mention it, because there's a lot of things that goes on in the EOC that really is just for EOC, or what they call official use only. So again, when it comes to emergency communications, we really need to watch what we say over the airwaves. Okay, another thing I want to mention, and I should have said this at the very beginning, I want to say thank you to all the servicemen and women who sacrificed their lives, their time, for this great country of ours. Today is Memorial Day, and we need to remember everyone that is now serving in the U.S. military, or who has served, or who has even given their own lives for our freedom that we cherish so much today. Okay, that's just about what I have to talk on this evening. One other thing I want to mention, this past Wednesday, I was involved in actually the local emergency planning committee meeting, and we had a tabletop exercise. That exercise was very, very good. I don't know how many on the net here who experienced a tabletop exercise, but I know most of us have experienced the regular exercise, but a tabletop exercise is what happens before a regular exercise takes place. It's sort of like a planning type exercise. And then later on, it's then converted to a regular exercise. But the tabletop exercise, I'm not going to go in all the details this evening, was very informative. I walked away from there learning a lot about the planning among the agencies during the tabletop exercise, and understand in a more better and informed way why tabletop exercises are needed. Okay, again, that's about all I have to talk on this evening. I know this was a little short lesson here, but Operation Security is very, very important, especially in these days and times. All right, let's go down the list here for comments, questions, or anything else. We move to KB4 GKI, Jimmy up in Wilkes County. Good evening, Jimmy, and your comments for the net. Over.
Well, this is KB4 GKI. Good evening to everybody on the net. Good training. Yes, OSCEPs is something that we really need to pay attention to, whether we're exercising or it's an actual event. And another training point that we need to bring out is don't forget when you start a net and through the net, if you're doing an actual voice net, you need to announce if it's an exercise, this is an exercise, because people are listening. To prove a point that people are listening, I was on the radio one day talking to a friend of mine on the way to work a blood drive. I had two people that I'd never seen before. One of them walked up to me and said, "I see you're ready to work for the vampires." And that was one of the comments that was made in the conversation. So they were listening. And in about 15 minutes, another lady walked up and said, "Having fun yet?" And that was also mentioned in the conversation on the way up to the blood drive. So people are listening on these frequencies that we use for amateur radio, even through the internet, believe it or not. So we have to be kind of careful what we're saying. KB4 GKI.
KB4 GKI, this is WB4 EMC. You're absolutely right. Especially when we have an exercise going on, we can't say it enough. Let me just back up. We cannot say it enough. We need to let everyone know that this is only an exercise. And like Mr. Holbrook just stated, a lot of people are listening. And two, you can be having a fictitious exercise going on, but if you don't mention that it's an exercise, then someone can probably panic, call up the news media, and you can create a little bit of a stir. And that's what we don't want to happen. So when we have an exercise, make sure that you stress over and over, this is only an exercise. Especially if you're transmitting messages from one station to another, you want to again state this is only an exercise. And Mr. Holbrook is absolutely right. A lot of people are listening. There's, you might say there might be some people who are regular amateur radio operators, and you might have some who might have access to the equipment or to just a receiver and listening to the nets. So that's the reason why I stated that if we are deployed on site, let's say out in the field or in the EOC, we should not broadcast anything that we see or hear without the approval of the emergency manager or the incident commander. They're the ones that will authorize any outgoing communications. So let's keep that well in mind. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Holbrook, for your comments. Let's move on down to KC0 Alpha Quebec Sierra. The guy that's operating on the repeater here, he's the EC of his group. His name is Scott. Good evening, Scott, and your comments and questions for the net. Over.
And 0 MRZ.